Veteran on the Move, episode 9er. Welcome to Veteran on the Move, your pathfinder to freedom. If you're a transitioning veteran, an entrepreneur wannabe, or someone who's still stuck in that job trying to escape, this podcast is dedicated to your success. So welcome aboard, sit back, and enjoy the ride. Danny O'Neill is the Bean Baron of the Roasterie, a specialty coffee roaster that services espresso bars, coffee houses, fine restaurants, high-end grocers, and coffee lovers all around the world. During his senior year of high school, he traveled to Costa Rica as a foreign exchange student and spent several weeks picking coffee. It was at this moment that his passion for coffee ignited. After college, he held various sales and marketing positions for 10 years. He decided to take the leap and start roasting coffee in the basement of his home. And in 1993, he founded the Roasterie on 3 basic premises: to find the best coffees in the world, to roast them the best way known to man, and to get them to his customers as fast as humanly possible. All right, Danny, thanks for coming on the show today. Really looking forward to talking to you about coffee and how you got started in the Roasterie. I told folks a little bit about you and how you got started. You were actually on a trip in high school down to Costa Rica when you fell in love with coffee, right?
Yeah, that's it. And, I kind of a harebrained idea on my part today. They'd say that was entrepreneurial, but I think my friends back in Iowa would say, no, that was stupid. But as a senior in high school, I just on a whim, I was dating a girl, AFS student from Tasmania. And I thought, well, that would be fun. So I didn't tell my parents. I just signed up to become a foreign exchange student, and finally had to start dragging my mom to these interview sessions with me. And about a week after Christmas in my senior year, I got a letter that said I was going to Costa Rica in about 3 weeks. And so I had never been out of the state of Iowa without somebody in my family, and, didn't have a suitcase, didn't have a passport, didn't speak a word of Spanish. And they sent me to Costa Rica. And I was young enough, naive enough, and, oblivious enough. I didn't even know where Costa Rica was. So I had to go look at the encyclopedia, find out where it was. And we scrambled, and my dad took me to Des Moines, put me on a plane. It was the first jet I'd ever been on in my life, and landed in the first foreign country I landed in was Miami. And then I did some orientation there. And then, 3 days later, I was in Costa Rica. And growing up in Iowa, we detasseled corn and walked beans and chopped thistles, fixed fence, baled hay. And I just grew up with farmers and doing farm work and loved it. And in Costa Rica, my friends were going coffee picking. And I just thought, well, that sounds fun. And I didn't drink coffee at the time, but oh my gosh, I loved it. I loved the farmer, and I loved being up at the top of the mountain and, sunny, fresh air and picking coffee. It was totally great. Just loved it. And then I came back to the United States after 1 year. And 3 weeks later, I started college, and my first finals, I started drinking coffee. And the first time I drank coffee, I drank an entire pot. And I couldn't sit still, and I couldn't study, I couldn't sleep, but I loved it. And so back then we called it gourmet coffee. Today we call it coffee. And then I went to work for a big company headquartered in Seattle in the mid '80s. And so I started going out to Seattle, regularly. And really got a great idea of what specialty coffee was all about, and really high quality coffee. And then later, in the early 90s, I transferred to Kansas City and started an MBA program at Rockhurst. And also in that time, went to Russia 2 different times to help as on a volunteer basis to help the Russian, and do our little part, I guess, and helping the Russians transition from a communist economy to a market-based economy. And the output of that was, or the, unintended consequence of that was, in working with the Russians, I felt like I was, they were so full of passion and so full of energy. I really felt like I used to be that way. And that's what kind of the outcome or the what happened after that trip. I just came back after that trip thinking and feeling hell-bent on doing something different. And, and coffee was the only idea that I had. And at the time, this was 1992, everybody around here, my friends in the Midwest, thought I was crazy because how could you possibly make a living off of coffee? And then
how do they like you now?
Yeah, they kind of almost like challenged me, like kind of like make a living off of that. And well, I did. I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I was just totally focused on high quality coffee and serving the customer. And I just wrote a statement kind of, about a year before I got started. I just focused on what if, I were to buy the finest coffees in the world, roast them the best way known to mankind, and get them to the customer as fast as humanly possible. And I felt like if I could do that, I could make my house payment and not have to go back to the corporate world. And that was really what I started with. And we still use that. That's still our motto, among the finest coffees in the world, roasted the best way known to mankind, get to the customer as fast as humanly possible. And I was able to make my house payment after about a year and a half.
Hey, I wanted to touch on something you said when you were in Russia. You were seeing how passionate they were, and you looked in the mirror and you thought, I used to be that way. What happened to you?
I'm not an anti-corporate person, but I did not fit in the tightly regulated, kind of the typical bureaucratic environment. And I just didn't fit. And I was naive enough to kind of all through my 20s and even into my younger 30s thinking, well, what's wrong with me? I got to get it. And in my head, I was probably immature, but I kept thinking, I'll get it one of these days, I'll figure this out. But finally it dawned on me that I wasn't going to change. Who I was who I was. And I just didn't fit in that environment. And it really became clear when I was in Russia, because I've always been, just real passionate and emotional. And I love talking about what things I love, and just not this staid, button up, button down environment kind of a guy. And not somebody who does the same thing every single day. And, I'm not a total free spirit maybe, but I'm probably a lot more that way. And I think we were totally with the intelligentsia of the Russian society. So they were very much that way, but I tend to be more that way. And, I want to have fun. I want to have a purpose. I want to have a mission. I want to make a difference. And it's not just I've never been one of those who just genuflect to the shareholders. Never been that way. And I've always, had a much broader view. And this is what I learned from the Jesuits, to have a much more of a stakeholder position instead of the stockholders. And the stockholders can very much have a say and be a stakeholder, but they're not the only ones. And so that was kind of all wrapped up in the one little bucket, and I just kind of came back just hell bent on doing something different. And man, I had no idea what it was going to be, but coffee was just kept coming back into my mind, and I kept dreaming about it. And the path, the path forward was not at all clear, but I just kept talking to my friends about it and talking to strangers, getting as much advice and counsel and perspective from as many people as I could. And it just kind of all worked out.
Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about with you was when I actually met you down at your roastery location down there in downtown Kansas City. It was celebration of the 20 years of the Kauffman Fasttrac program, and your claim to fame was you were in the very first Kauffman Fasttrac program over 20 years ago.
Yeah, and it was a huge difference. And to your question a second ago about starting off and what was it like in Russia and what did I learn? I had another kind of an epiphany in the fast track, and it was in the basement of the old Kauffman Foundation, and I just felt like I was in this protective cocoon, and I just didn't want to leave. And I couldn't imagine how they could build a new building and lose this mojo, this special magic of an atmosphere. What were they ever going to do? And so in that basement in Fast Track, I loved it. I mean, I was in the Fast Track too, where you have a going company and you want to grow it, and I loved it. I loved it. It helped me do all the things like a good solid business plan that I would never have done on my own because I didn't know how to do it on my own, and it was awesome. But one of the key things that came out of that is early on, this teacher, our instructor, she listed all these attributes and characteristics of an entrepreneur. And I still remember them using the term entrepreneur for the first time. And I thought, whoa, that sounds good. What's that? What's that mean? I honestly didn't know what an entrepreneur was or what it meant, but it sounded so much better than all the other things I'd ever been called. But listing on the chalkboard all the characteristics, it was ironic, and I still just feel how kind of twisted it is, because they were all the same characteristics that got me in trouble all through Catholic school and in corporate.
That's funny.
Stubborn, independent, doesn't follow process, doesn't show his work, all these things. And it wasn't lost on me. But anyway, that really helped. And what it helped me realize, again, I'm always kind of late to the game in terms of being mature, but I think I was 33, and I just kind of started to get comfortable with who I was instead of trying to change all these things, to get there like everybody else did. I didn't not show my work to make the nuns upset. I didn't show my work because I didn't know how to show my work. I got the answer differently. My head works differently. And so I got to be really comfortable with who I was, with who an entrepreneur was. And I kind of quit trying to get there like everybody else. And once I did that, oh man, it was much more effortless, much more enjoyable, more fun. And man, I did a lot more, and it was easier and faster, and that I felt liberated during the whole fast track process. And man, I loved it. And I served on the board for 10 years, and I have hopefully funneled dozens, if not hundreds of people into the fast track program because I think it's so good and so strong. And this, James, but a lot of people, when they think about fast track, they don't, or any other program like that, that some of the folks who maybe don't understand, they'll say, well, half the people don't even end up starting their own company. And I always think, God, but for the grace of God, they were in fast track. Thank God, because before they found out that they had a crazy idea, or their idea wasn't a good idea, it wasn't sustainable, it wasn't going to work. And thank God that they found out through fast track, instead of losing their house or losing their marriage or losing all their family's money, or taking money from friends and family and losing it all. Thank God they were able to find out that their idea didn't make sense before they had to go there. And then the ones who do start a company, or build their company, they find out, like me, a way to do it a heck of a lot easier and more efficiently. So I just had a great experience through that.
Yeah, and sometimes the benefit of going through a program like Fast Track or the startup weekends that are sponsored, like you said, that idea that's burning and gnawing at you inside, you get it out there on the table and you run it through the grinder and you realize, oh, you know what? Yeah, that's maybe not such a good idea. Let me go find another idea. And so finding out, failing fast is definitely a benefit to that. So you can put it behind you and then move on to the next one.
Yep, failing fast and failing more often and failing more inexpensively. Another thing I see out there, James, is and less, but traditionally, you have generically, you have this idea. And when I have that idea, I tell as many people as I can so they can vet it and tell me why this won't work. And what do you think? Well, too often people have this idea and then they go secret and then they draw the wagons around it and they're going to go Katie bar the door. They're doing this and, you know, and to their peril. And so I think, Fasttrac really helps get whatever those ideas are, get them out there, let people weigh in on them, vet them in a protected environment, and which is unbelievably valuable and unbelievably costly and even catastrophic if you don't do that.
Yeah. Hey, Danny, I know you got a busy schedule, but just so you know, I'm Joe, actually.
I'm sorry.
James is my dad, so no, that's all right. I understand. Doing lots of interviews, and no harm, no foul. But anyways, what you're talking about is interesting. Steve Jobs, and actually it was Guy Kiyosaki who used to work at Apple. He's got a quote saying, or like a presentation where he says, if you have an idea and you're keeping it secret because you don't want anybody to steal your idea, you're approaching it completely the wrong way, because ideas are a dime a dozen. There's thousands of ideas out there. The people that take action on their ideas are the ones that become successful. And don't think that just because you think you got a good idea, somebody's going to steal it, because they're not. More than likely, they're not, because it takes so much action and so much work to make that one idea happen that if it's really your idea, you're the one that's going to take the action. Someone's not going to hear about your idea and go run with it like you think they are.
Amen. And if you ask any chef that's that has some self-confidence and ask them for a recipe, almost any chef will give you that recipe. And then they'll probably have some kind of a smart aleck response of, let me know how that works out for you, Joe. Because a recipe is only a small part of the process, and when you do something and how you do something, and then your own personal mojo and magic that you put in there, So yeah, that he was very bright in that, and I that's very much the case. It's been my experience.
Yeah, and so if somebody's listening to this and they've got this great idea, but they're scared to tell anybody about it, well, you'll never get anywhere unless you expose that idea to people that can help you and put it through a process. And that was another thing I wanted to mention about the Fasttrac program is, even if your idea turns out to be a dud, if you've gone through the entrepreneurial process once now, whether it be a startup weekend or a Fasttrac program or one of the other entrepreneur boot camps that are out there these days, going through the entrepreneurial process is huge. It's because once you've been through the process a couple of times, you can take a new idea and run it through the grinder real quick, throw it on the table, expose it, and it's either thumbs up or thumbs down, and you move on.
Totally. And it's like the plan, same thing. Eisenhower would say, the real value of a plan is the act of planning. Once you get that plan, you can just about throw it away, because going through that process, as you mentioned, that's where the real value is. Because by building that plan, I can just guarantee you're going to have dozens, if not hundreds of, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. Oh my God, thank God this is in here, because I would never have thought about that. And man, you want to learn all those things in the planning process, not once you're up and going and you kind of have a gun held to your head, so to speak, by the marketplace or by customers. And once the heat is on, it's on, and it's relentless forever.
Yeah, so. In the military, planning is huge. Matter of fact, we have people that go to schools for a year to learn how to do nothing but plan, and they go into a job afterwards where all they are is a planner, a staff planner. They're professional planners. But we also have a saying that says the best plans will not survive initial contact with the enemy. And I'm sure you can relate to that in the civilian world. You can have the greatest plan, but as soon as you start taking action, everything's going to change.
When the bullets fly, absolutely, absolutely.
Now, where are you at now with the roastery as far as number of locations? And I'm not sure if you're willing. I listen. I'm a big podcast listener myself, and I love it when people share numbers. And I'm not sure how much you're willing to share, whether it's revenue or how many pounds of coffee or any kind of numbers you can throw. As especially military guys love to have numbers because it really puts things in perspective.
You bet. I do too. I will say we have, we crossed over $10 million a couple years ago, and we do over 1 million pounds of coffee roasted. And then we roast over 1 million. And then we have 3 cafes, independent cafes. And each of those are, in their own way are pretty successful. I don't want to say that in an arrogant way because we earn it every day. And then we have, a significant online presence as well. And our channels that we sell through are primarily the fine restaurant, and then the upper scale grocery stores in our marketplace. We have about 80 of those. And then the university channels, we have a lot of universities where we sell a lot of coffee, and quite active on quite a number of college and university campuses. And then independent coffee shops. And then in our local market here at Kansas City, we serve the local Costco's and Sam's wholesales. And those are the primary channels for us.
All right. That's great. And I appreciate you sharing those numbers because it definitely helps putting things in perspective. So, I'd say I never really drank much coffee, but the Marine Corps kind of turned me into a coffee drinker. I try to wean myself off of it when I can. And I certainly don't try to drink a whole pot of it at one time. But so I appreciate good coffee. I certainly wouldn't view myself as a connoisseur, but why is roastery coffee better than some other kind of coffee?
Well, there's a lot of reasons, but primarily, first and foremost, you can't. I'm from a small town in Iowa, and there's this expression: you can put lipstick on a pig.
Oh yeah.
So you can't. I'm not a miracle worker. So if we don't start with extraordinary, world-class, high quality coffee, then nothing else is really going to matter. So first and foremost, that's one of the gifts that we have. We can find, where the coffee is hiding in the world, the best quality coffee, and we buy from about 35 different countries right now. So incredibly high quality coffee, raw material, and then we are absolutely anal retentive on quality in terms of roasting and process and freshness. So how we roast the coffee and get the best that coffee has to offer, that's another part of the mojo. I wouldn't say it's magic. It's part of the mojo, though. There's art and science, but there's a lot of science in it. And then just the whole, when you really get into quality, it's the lack of variability. It's to be able to deliver the same thing again and again and again. And I know you went through that in your training in the Marines. It's, just doing the same thing. You don't even think about it. You just do it again and again and again. And that's what we as customers want. We want consistency, whether it's the cheesy corn at Jack Stack or Kansas City blend from the Roasterie. We want it to taste like we know it's supposed to taste like every single time. And I think we've gotten extremely good at that. Again, not in an arrogant way, because we have a great team and they work their butts off to make sure that happens. But that's where our focus is. It's always on the product and hopefully never on ourselves.
Right. I'm sure. I know consistency is a huge key in that type of business. And I wanted to ask you: do you ever get a chance to go down to Central America or other places you might be buying coffee and actually walk the beans?
Oh my gosh, yeah. In fact, I've driven to Panama twice from Kansas City, and we've been I did a trip, just about a trip a month for 12 years, and I still do 4 or 5 trips a year. This year I've been to Sumatra and Vietnam and Costa Rica, Colombia, going to Mexico here in a couple of months in August. But I'll do 3 or 4 or 5 trips a year now. But we also have a bean hunter who does a number of trips himself. But oh my gosh, yeah, I've done over 100 trips, I'm sure.
The bean hunter, that almost sounds like a TV show. You could turn that into a TV show, The Bean Hunter.
It'd be pretty exciting.
Yeah. Well, hey, Danny, our time's about up here. I was wondering if you had any last minute or parting words for any veterans or soon-to-be veterans out there that have this burning desire or idea inside of them, and they really would like to become an entrepreneur, go into business for themselves, but they don't really know where to start.
You bet. I would first and foremost take their military training experience because it's invaluable. Everything that they learn in training and planning, it's just as important as it was in survival there. It's just as important in survival in a business. So take that, apply it in business. I would start at the small business development centers at most universities, SCORE, the Service Corps of Retired Executive Officers, and all this is free, right? And then here in Kansas City, or online, the Kauffman Foundation. And then, oh my gosh, I'm having a senior moment. Maria Meyer's organization is just a great funnel, located through the University of Missouri here in Kansas City. I can't think of the organization. I'm embarrassed, but that's a great place to start. And just, and then finally, with respect to whatever you do, make sure it's something that you love, that you're passionate about, because it's going to be harder than you ever imagined it will be. And it's not dollar signs that pull you through those tough moments. It's this intrinsic value or this intrinsic notion that you pull from within, that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you're following whatever intrinsic passions you have. So just make sure it's something that you really want to do, not just something that you think you can do.
Hey, Danny, that's phenomenal advice. People pay big money for advice like that. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. And we are out of time, so we'll talk again here in the near future. Thanks for being on.
Joe. You have a great day.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye.
I'm out. Thank you for listening to Veteran on the Move, your pathfinder to freedom. If you like the show, leave us a review on iTunes. Reviews are always greatly appreciated. So until next time, this veteran is Oscar Mike.